or 1 to 10 million in revenue. It's more about delivering the value that the product had committed.
People value profitability, but they value growth more.
Insights into the innovations and revolutions of the marketing world. Welcome to the Marketing Scientists Podcast. Today's guest is Kyle Poyar, the author behind Growth Unhinged, an amazing newsletter that I'm sure you have heard of. He was also a former VC at OpenView and just started his own fund. Kyle and I had a great discussion about all things attribution, incrementality, pricing, customer success, and everything in between. This is a must listen for any growing business. So let's dive straight in.
Kyle, I am so excited to have you on this podcast. I've been waiting for a long time. We exchanged some notes on LinkedIn. I feel like a couple of months ago when you were writing this piece about your guide to GTM metrics, if I'm not wrong, or unified GTM metrics. I want to start there. You probably did a lot of research. You talked about, MQLs being dead. And I saw your build up towards that post, and then you released it. What was the reaction? What was the most surprising thing that happened as a result of that post, if any?
Well, thanks for having me on. It's funny, the MQL lobby is strong, so got a little bit pushback, but also a lot of interest. I'd say what's been fascinating recently is we think about like this sort of bifurcation of we've got inbound and outbound, and maybe we've got PLG on the side. I think people are realizing that those frameworks just don't really make sense in this current environment, especially with so much better data available on exactly who's in our target market through systems like Clay, KeyPlay, Apollo, ZoomInfo, and so on. We should be able to understand who is our target audience, and then we should be able to understand where they are in the journey with us. And we should actually be trying to do things with marketing and outbound and automation and so on that's all coordinated to taking these accounts and moving them through the journey with us. And so I think a lot of people have kind of reached out and said, this is exactly what I needed to show my CEO. I needed to get them over this like artificial MQL target that makes no sense, and towards like teams actually working together to convert our target audience into pipeline.
No, I love that. I often tell people this thing. So I'm a former, VP of marketing myself who turned into a startup founder. So I have deep appreciation for this topic. And the thing that I tell people all the time when I'm advising other startups or even our customers is the word qualified is absolute nonsense. Who are we to qualify our customers? They are qualifying us, right? If you think about it, I go and I'm qualifying whether I want to buy your product or service or not. And so that mentality shift is really important. I couldn't agree more. Now, you talk about this idea of going from identifying to aware to interested to considering to selecting to evaluating. And isn't that sort of the OG of marketing, sort of, right? Like AIDA, or like it feels like there's a lost art of marketing. Do you agree, or am I off base here?
Oh, yeah. I mean, these principles, I didn't make up the principles, but it means people have been talking about this stuff for decades and decades. I think what's different is if we wanted to know how many people in our target audience were aware of us, we'd probably be a consumer brand that runs a big blinded, mass market survey. And we maybe do that, a quarterly or once a year to understand kind of where we are with our target audience. That context hasn't really come to B2B all that much. So first of all, it's bringing some of these B2C concepts into B2B. And then the second thing is we have the ability increasingly to understand in real time where we are with these folks. And I don't think people have fully appreciated that, right? Between marketing, sales, de-anonymizing who visits our website through PLG, we can get a sense for our accounts that we care about actually kind of engaging and kind of bringing themselves through the journey. And we should be able to look at signals like, hey, are they self-educating on us by visiting high intent pages on our website? Are they demonstrating purchase intent off of our website? Are they signing up for our free trial and expanding kind of their free adoption within their company, or are they engaging with outbound campaigns over email? Like, we should be able to take these signals and don't just say, hey, we're going to use X signal and then run a play against it, right? We can use these signals to know where we are in the account and what's the next best action, and to continuously optimize this motion.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, I have to take exception to like one point that I'm seeing in B2B SaaS a lot over the last couple of years, or maybe a few years. This idea of a unified GTM, this idea of a unified way of thinking about marketing and sales and customer success and what have you, right? And I'm curious to hear your take on this. So my take is that, yes, we're all on the same team, for sure. That's the definition of a business, right? And we are all being evaluated on how many points on the board are we putting up. But each function has a different position in the starting lineup, right? Somebody might be a shooting guard, and somebody might be a point guard, and somebody might be a center, and somebody might be, playing just defense. And the point that I'm trying to make is, yes, we're unified, but maybe the measures of success are different. What's your take?
Well, you lost me a little bit with the analogy because I'm not a big sports person, but I think I got the gist of it. So in my mind, where this goes is that marketing should ultimately own ICP pipeline, like generating pipeline. Sales should probably own closing that pipeline. There's some nuances with PLG businesses, but there should probably be that bifurcation. But what I think is really important is it's not to say we're looking at marketing as on the hook for doing all the activity to generate that pipeline. They should actually be orchestrating, right? If they own the number, they're accountable for the number. That doesn't mean they're responsible for doing everything to get to the number. And I want to get away from some of the attribution battles of, hey, this is a marketing sourced lead from our paid ad campaign, and so therefore marketing is going to get credit. We're going to get a bigger marketing budget because we generated this lead, when really that was like a demand capture, right, for something else that actually happened. I see a lot of times, for example, folks spend a lot on branded search, and then they claim that it's from Google search or paid ads that drove the conversion. It's like, well, someone had to Google you get that conversion. So you don't actually know what drove the conversion, but you're going to take credit for it and apply it to your Google budget. And I don't think it comes out of negative intentions, but this is the systems we set up for organizations. This is what you have to do if you want to justify that budget for next year. So I think if we can move to a model where marketing owns pipeline, but is also on the hook for kind of orchestrating whatever's going to be best for efficiently generating that pipeline, I think marketing will spend more time on things like who's the right target audience in the first place that we should be reaching out to. They would also be looking at more of the automation and AI-driven kind of next-gen go-to-market tooling. They'd probably have the BDR team reporting to them, which I know is a sensitive topic, at least in a dotted line, but I think in many cases, responsible for that team. And I think a lot of great marketing leaders would be amazing at this kind of broader mandate, and they would really welcome it. But that's a big shift from marketing being responsible for generating a certain volume of MQLs.
Totally love this, and perfect segue into the concept of attribution. I'm taking it you're not a big fan of all the first touch, last touch, multi-touch stuff. And I noticed you and Gaurav from ClickUp had done a post together on the concept of incrementality, which is music to my ears. That's what we do here at Paramark. Can you describe to our audience sort of what your take is on that, conversation of attribution versus incrementality? What was your perception after, working with Gaurav on that piece?
Well, yeah. So just stepping back, I think that I'm not the first person to take issues with attribution. I don't think anyone loves it. I think the challenge is people feel the need to have attribution in order to justify where they're spending money, and justify the budgets in general. And so it's sort of this necessary evil for anyone, even if you do kind of like it. But I think what's challenging with attribution is that in this current environment, there's a lot that's happening that we don't have signals on, whether that's dark social, whether that's things that are in community, word of mouth. And then we tend to have something take credit for it. And then we have fights over, is the thing that takes credit for it the first touch? Is it the last touch? Is it some combination of touches? When regardless of which kind of measurement you use, it's ignoring what is actually happening from the customer's perspective. And so if we step back and talk to Gaurav about this in the interview, but if we take a step back, we care about driving incremental revenue within our target accounts or target customer base, and we want to be doing the things that are really efficiently generating that incremental revenue. And so it's more about incrementality than it is about attribution. We have to look at things across the different teams that contribute. There's also often a lot of magic that can happen. We can combine techniques, right? So maybe we'll do outbound campaigns paired with branded social, or paired with thought leadership on social, right? Where if we bring those two together, you can actually have better conversion than if you treat those separately. Or if you bring together some sort of way to get someone to your website and move the BDRs to working on kind of more of these warm outbound towards folks that are already showing some intent, like there can be better effectiveness with the BDR team. But anyway, I digress. We want to look at essentially what drives that incremental revenue and be able to understand what are the things we should be investing more in and less in that actually reaches and influences our target accounts. And we should all be a little bit agnostic as to what that is. Like, it doesn't matter if it's a classical marketing thing. It shouldn't matter if it's paid ads. It shouldn't matter if it's events, content, or some combination of things in an orchestrated play towards our target account. And by the way, it's normally an orchestrated play, I think, that ultimately does it. But if we can take a step back and not have the attribution fights and think more about incrementality and what can we do to engage our target audience and convert them into pipeline, I think we can have a lot better conversations and be more creative as an organization.
I couldn't agree more. Obviously, given that we provide a platform and a solution for understanding the incrementality of your marketing and sales investments. Okay, switching gears a little bit. How did you end up on this journey? You've been writing Growth Unhinged for like 3-4 years. Where did the title come from? And why did you start this, the series?
Well, so I've been working on revenue growth for the last 15 years. Started my career as a strategy consultant at Simon Kucher, and then joined the kind of venture capital growth equity space as an operating partner, working hands-on with portfolio companies who were generally 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 million in revenue, and helping them get to hopefully much bigger outcomes. And so I've been an active practitioner in this space for a while. I also have been kind of studying the space kind of more from a research or industry observer standpoint for a while too, starting things like the OpenView SaaS benchmarks report in 2017. And during COVID, I was realizing, I wasn't able to spend time with people in person as much. I wasn't doing as much networking. I just figured, hey, let me try to take what I'm observing and share it on LinkedIn. So really started doing that in 2020. I tend to be long-winded, so run up against character limitations, but was finding, hey, there's a lot of interest in what I'm doing. People would like to go deeper. I'm getting connected with people that want to share more hands-on case studies of some of these frameworks or ideas and how they're applying it to their business. Let me just take what I'm doing on LinkedIn and kind of turn it into a newsletter. And so started doing that in March 2021. And have found it's honestly an interesting flywheel where I'll often actually test something on LinkedIn, see if it resonates, get some pushback in the comments, but also get a lot of great kind of constructive feedback or ideas and examples. If something resonates, I'll write a deeper post for Growth Unhinged, and then I will share that back on LinkedIn. And often people see that and really agree with it or disagree with it, and then reach out and start meeting with them and learning more. And it all becomes this flywheel that helps me get better at what I do, which is helping startups grow faster. And it's kind of writing with and for a community rather than writing kind of as an outside observer of that community.
Very cool. What was the inspiration behind the name? Why Unhinged?
Well, I like a bit of a pun. So for me, the idea was like, growth that was way, unhinged in terms of like off the charts, like way faster than you'd expect, faster than before, but also, not being afraid to have a bit of a personality to it. I mean, it's coming from more of like my personal vantage point. I want to share ideas that are maybe a little bit out there, or at least share a perspective around things that's a little bit spicier. And so I'm probably not fully unhinged in the newsletter, but it is my aspiration to eventually get there.
I love it. I love spicy takes, so it's fantastic. Okay, so you've been studying growth, and I've seen a bunch of your posts on pricing. Obviously, you spent time at SKP. I remember using SKP services at multiple companies that I've been at. So deep appreciation for pricing and all the good work that you all brought to the table. And you've also written about all the stuff that's happening with SaaS and AI pricing in the last couple of months, if I'm not wrong. If you are advising, let's narrow it to $1 million to 10 million, right? Given that that's maybe where your focus has been in revenue, and you're advising them on how to think about pricing going forward, what are the trends that you think everyone needs to pay attention to with regards to SaaS and AI pricing and what's happening there?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. So if I zoom out, like in general, most companies have kind of underappreciated the power of pricing. And especially when you're at that, call it 1 or 2 million ARR mark, you've gone from doing anything to get your product in the hands of customers, right? Wanting that feedback, wanting kind of real proof points that your product works, to, hey, now we know our target customer who values our product the most. We know our product works in real kind of enterprise use cases. We know how to reach them, right? We've also probably listened to the feedback they had and built more and more product from what we had before. But monetization is a lagging indicator, essentially, of the value that you're creating for your customers. And so there's generally a pretty big opportunity to then take all of that incremental value you've created and better monetize it through smarter pricing and packaging. So I think first and foremost, my feedback is treat it as an important part of growing your business, because it can be extremely powerful. And when I do research, the average software company is able to increase their ACVs by about 60% from that 0 to 1 million mark to that 1 to 10 million mark. So it's a pretty kind of sizable contributor to revenue growth that people don't necessarily have folks on their team that are experts in it, that are dedicated to it, that are collecting the research and data on it. So that puts point number one. Point number two is your business model and your pricing model really get baked in over time, and it starts getting harder and harder to change that as you scale. So if you think about, if you're in a mode of having founder-led sales, not a ton of customers who can maybe do like manual billing and invoicing, you have much more flexibility to test out different approaches now. Once you have a team of 20 sales reps, right? You maybe have pricing published on your website. You have customers that are used to you have a certain expectation for how much they paid. It's so much harder to ever change things on them. And so what I'd flag for folks is, I think there's still plenty of opportunity to adjust your packages or your price points over as you scale, but it gets really hard to change the pricing model or the metric around your pricing. And so that's something that I'd encourage folks to spend more time on earlier. And a default that most folks have when they start off is, hey, we should sell as a seat-based subscription. That's how buyers have bought products in my space. That's how my competitors are priced. They can predict their bill. Like, we're getting no pushback from procurement, right, from this pricing model. And so they have this sort of vision of this being the default. But the next generation of products that are coming to market, I don't think fit well with a typical seat-based subscription model. So more and more, the products I'm seeing have some combination of AI value propositions, API, automation, or maybe it's software plus like fintech or other things kind of, in combination of software. And it's such that the value that you're delivering to a customer doesn't necessarily scale one-to-one with having more people at that company logging in. And in fact, it might be the inverse, where as your product is delivering more value, the customer needs fewer people to be logging in. So you have to find a more creative way of unlocking that value creation. And I'm thinking more and more that is tied to usage-based pricing models, or finding ways to charge based on the units of work that your product is delivering, rather than providing kind of or charging based on access to a subscription to your product.
Yeah, I love that. We did something interesting, so I'm curious to hear your take on this. We published our pricing at our initial launch. We launched about a year ago, and our price points are like 5 and 6 figures. We're just going to put it on the website, see what happens. And it's turned into this awesome situation where, back to the point of that qualification thing, I don't have to worry about that. Hey, our pricing is public. Like, before you even set up a demo, you can actually just see what we do, how we price it, all our metrics, and our price point. And if that scares you, I'm totally fine not talking to you. No big deal, right? And the reason we were able to do this is because we had researched the market, and we kind of understood what is the willingness to pay even before we launched, and had a clear, sense of it. The problem was that we had to revise the pricing up after like 3 months, because oh no, we are undercharging. So that was interesting. I get a lot of pushback around this concept from other SaaS enterprise, type of founders who are like, hey, there's no way we can do this. And I keep encouraging them, no, you can. You can still have an enterprise plan that says custom, but doesn't mean that you don't anchor people on, the entry point. Do you think I made a mistake by doing that, or would you encourage more people to take that approach?
Well, yeah, I'm a little bit torn, to be totally transparent. So on the one hand, the trends are towards more pricing transparency. Whether you look at services like Vendor or elsewhere, your buyers are increasingly able to get insight about how much you charge, whether they are doing that from learning it from you or learning it from someone else. And so if that's the case, I'd rather have that intent on my website and be able to position the pricing in the best possible light. But so that's all a trend, but it's not to say that we're fully there yet, right? The things are still evolving, and that doesn't mean that people need to change behavior overnight. And so what I kind of encourage folks to think about is what should be in place for you to have price, to get to the point where pricing is on your website, which is probably a goal or could be a goal for you. And what needs to be in place, ideally you have pricing simplified enough that you can actually communicate it easily for customers where they can digest it without needing to talk to someone. Now, that is hard to do for many products where there's a lot of complexity that goes into pricing, and you really need to have a conversation with someone to be able to figure it out, right? You don't want to put it on your website if it's going to take someone like a half an hour to estimate.
That's true.
I think another thing is, if your pricing is going to change, right, where you have really no idea what it is, it gets hard to put on your website, because once you put it on your website, it's tracked in the Wayback Machine. Buyers have probably seen it. And so, for instance, if you start selling customers and then you put pricing on your website that's half the price of what you sold it at before, those buyers are going to come back being like, hey, wait a minute, how do I get half my bill? What's going on here, right? And so it becomes very hard to change, especially bringing it down. It is a little easier to go up, because then your existing customers feel like they got a great deal for being an early customer. But it's hard to bring price down once you've published it. And so if you feel like you have no idea where the market is and you want to test high and low price points, you probably don't want to put it out there publicly yet. And then the final thing is, I think a lot of people are nervous about putting pricing out there because they think it's going to totally shut down a buying conversation. And if they can explain the ROI or demo the product, or get to a decision maker, then people can understand the pricing in context with the value. And so what I see it is, you have to be really buttoned up about how you explain value, so that people don't have sticker shock when they see the price without you being able to do that. And I think if there are markets where there's kind of historical incumbents or existing spend in a category, and people already have these price anchors in their head. And so if that's the case, it's a little bit easier to publish price because you already kind of have that established, and maybe pricing is an advantage for you over the alternatives. But if you're building something that is a totally new product category that doesn't exist before, or kind of a new way of delivering ROI, you have to be really great about communicating that elsewhere. Otherwise, you might run into these sticker shock concerns.
Makes total sense. And it all comes down to then your website, your value prop, your marketing, right? And how you're sort of packaging everything up so that it's obvious by the time somebody even goes to the pricing page, they know what they're looking at. And it's not something that they're trying to, I had a really interesting example. We use Fivetran for a whole bunch of stuff to move data from one point to the other. Their pricing is so complicated. We love the product. It enables a lot of good things for us. But it literally took, I think, 2 or 3 calls and like multiple spreadsheets to get a sense of the estimate. And that was fine. But I think they were still transparent about it. Like they had some numbers on the website, but you couldn't predict what it's going to be because there were all these new concepts in their, pricing model that an average SaaS, buyer doesn't think about. So I totally understand what you're saying there. Okay. So, bringing all of this to a point about CAC and payback and growth rates and the rule of 40, you've done a lot of work around that. And I particularly like your 2x2 that you had drawn about NDR and CAC payback. And so help us understand what's happening there and what is the rule of 40 evolving to from your perspective? And is that still holding true with the current macro and all the stuff that's happening with AI? Or is it kind of, that was the old way of looking at it and maybe 2025 will be, back to growth at all costs, given what we're seeing in the market? Like, I'm curious. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, if I take a step back, so software businesses are valued based on a combination of like how much revenue they generate, and how quickly they're growing, right? At a super high level. But if they're spending a lot of money to facilitate that growth, that's obviously not as great as if they are profitably growing. And so if I look at kind of public comps, and these vary all the time, if you look at every incremental amount of growth versus every kind of equivalent incremental improvement in profitability, growth is weighted about 2x as valuable. So people value profitability, but they value growth more. And so what we're ultimately all trying to figure out is how do we grow as quickly as we can within certain efficiency guardrails. And that's where rule of 40, I think, is an interesting, it's an interesting like just way of summarizing that, right? If you can grow at 40% at break even, that's roughly equivalent to growing 50%, with maybe 10%, negative 10% margins, or growing 30% with 10% profitability. But I think that the rule of 40 is maybe an oversimplification. There's another framework around looking at, your growth rate plus a multiplier plus your profitability and using that to get this sort of rule of X metric, which is maybe more predictive for overall valuations and the health of your business. But rule of 40 is at least a somewhat helpful indicator of, hey, is this a business that has the right combination of growth and profitability that will ultimately be valued in the market? But so super helpful for understanding your business and how healthy it is and how people will value it. But it doesn't help you make decisions about how to get there and what you need to do now in order to get there in the future. And so what I wanted to do with the benchmarks data is unpack what are the leading indicators that predict these companies that are going to be growing quickly and growing efficiently with a good rule of 40. And the best indicators, not surprisingly, are CAC payback period. So how fast you pay off the acquisition costs of getting a new customer, but not that on its own. So it's CAC payback plus net revenue retention. So what happens for every $100 you get from customers right now? What happens a year later? Does that expand? Does that contract? And so on. And it turns out the companies that have, below median CAC payback and above 100% net revenue retention are dramatically faster growing and significantly more efficient. And so if you can start to look at those two metrics, now all of a sudden you have two things that you can look at within your business of, hey, net retention is under that 100% mark. Do we have the right customer success practices? Do we have new products we can cross-sell, upsell? Do we have a pricing model that helps us expand with customers as they grow their business and are successful with their product, right? Like you can actually start to build specific, objectives or plans around how to improve those metrics because you know those are the right things to do to ultimately get to that output that you're looking for.
I love that. It's very top of mind as we're kind of entering that phase of the business ourselves. So I use this podcast as a way to learn, which is, you've given me a masterclass on how to think about this. This is awesome. Okay, last thing to talk about before we wrap up here. You talked about customer success recently on LinkedIn as well. And, this is top of mind for us. We sell into large B2B and B2C companies. Our average contracts are, $80K-ish. And customer success is a key part of what I almost think of it as the most important part of the business, right? Especially as like a, early stage business. And this, for what I'm sort of seeing in my own sort of observations of customer success is it's less about the relationship management, although there's definitely a part of it. It's less about the account management, and it's more about delivering the value that the product had committed. And is that the right way to think about it from your research? Or like, do you think that, no, that it should all be in the product and it's all just about the relationship and account management? I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, well, if I zoom out, so what's been happening over the last year or two, as folks have been looking to build these more efficient growth companies, customer success was a function that got hit, right? There were often a number of cuts in that function. People saw it as, well, the CSM is managing 50 accounts. Why can't they manage 70, 75 accounts, whatever it is? So that was a function that saw some disinvestment over the couple of years. And part of it is maybe because they didn't own or have clearly as strong of like a revenue ownership as sales team did, people saw them as more of a cost center versus a revenue driver. And it's my belief that especially if we think about these next gen pricing models where you're charging based on usage or work delivered, the initial commitment in the sale is much less important than actually driving that adoption. And whenever you drive the adoption, you get paid for it. So customer success becomes a revenue generating function rather than a cost center. And it becomes really the lifeblood of a business. So that's the kind of broader view of where I see things going. But then if you unpack of like, all right, but what does that mean? Like, what is the role of customer success? When I look at retention rates and expansion within customers, I've actually done what I call a patient zero analysis, which is new meaning with COVID and everything. But when it's instead of looking at the customers who churn, if you look at the customers who have the biggest expansion and you reverse engineer what happened to them, what do they do before they signed up? What do they do in their first day, first week, first month, and so on? You often find that these patterns of your best customers are that they're setting up certain integrations, or they've had X use case or multiple use cases for your product, and they knew about it relatively early on. And so it comes down to really what happens in the first few weeks or months of adopting your product really sets the tone for, is that customer going to see a lot of value, have a great experience and want to expand their spend, or ultimately feel like the promise of what they thought they were going to get when they were signing up was not what was ultimately delivered. And I think that it's so critical to think about these milestones and orient around not just selling the customer moving on, but what are these leading indicators for your business that tell you this is going to be a very healthy customer in the future, and making sure you get to that point with your customer base as quickly as possible. And so I think that is, there's certainly a role for product, but you need someone that has that as their North Star objective. And that's probably not the product team. That's probably going to be someone that has that relationship with the customer to drive the behavior. One final thing to just add is that I think it's so funny that we saw customer health scores became like a thing, and then people lost interest, and they kind of keep coming back every now and again. But I look at a lot of customer health scores, and people will be like, well, we look to see, are the number of seats declining month over month, or have people stopped using the product this month? And we look at those as, the triggers to say, hey, now customer success should engage with this customer. What I tend to find is you almost never have a chance to win back a customer. In these instances, they've essentially already made a decision to churn. They just haven't told you yet. What I tend to find is the most actionable time is in that it's before you've sold a customer or in the first month after you've sold them. That's when you have the most influence around customer retention. And so to your point, I think that is really critical.
Love that. Well, Kyle, this has been fantastic. Thank you. So I feel like everybody in the SaaS world already knows you, but if you don't know Kyle, you need to go to Kyle's LinkedIn profile, follow, subscribe, go to growthunhinged.com.
It is.
There we go. Growthunhinged.com and sign up. Whether you're in marketing, sales, customer success, pricing, you can kind of see that he adds value in pretty much all dimensions. So Kyle, thank you again. Loves having you here, and looking forward to more great content from you.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Absolutely.
There you go, folks. That was Kyle Poyar, the author of Growth Unhinged. Follow him on LinkedIn and Twitter. He's a prolific writer and has always amazing insights to share. We'll have many more fun and insightful conversations next week, so tune in again. See you then.